All right, folks, let's get started and welcome once again. We're going to talk about Platform Engineering 3.0, practical guidance for the AI era. We're going to explore how platform engineering has evolved over time and focus today really on how to use AI with platform engineering. What kind of practical skills do you need? Does your team need to adopt AI enhanced infrastructure workflows? Today, our presenters are Robert Coppersmith, who's the VP of Sales Engineering at NV0, and myself, Sam Gabriel. I'm a platform engineer and founder of Tech&8 Solutions, Inc. So I'll ask Robert, or also known as Bobby, to jump in and just introduce yourself if you don't mind, Bobby, and I'll go
Sure.
out.
Hey everyone. Thanks for joining us on this lovely Wednesday morning for those in the Pacific time zone, Wednesday afternoon for those on the East Coast. My name is Bobby Coppersmith. As Sam mentioned, I'm one of the leaders here for the sales engineering team. And prior to joining M0, I spent a few years managing teams at IBM. And prior to that, I was at a startup called Turbonomic, which ended up getting acquired by IBM. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm based out of Southern California, so it's morning for me, and really excited to talk to you guys today. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Bobby. And yeah, myself, I'm in Toronto, Canada, and I actually started my career in network engineering, funny enough, and did worked for an internet service provider for a number of years. So if anybody on the call here is from a networking engineering background, hi, first of all, and I know where you're coming from. And if you want to get into this space, it's absolutely possible. And actually, it's that kind of background helps a lot. And yeah, so I've worked for a number of companies. I moved from network engineering space into DevOps around 2018 or so. I worked for Docker for some time, worked for Sysdig, worked for HashiCorp, was my last um, full-time job. And then after that, I started to build content in the platform engineering space. So YouTube videos, blog posts, and also I have a training academy teaching different platform engineering technologies. Cool. So let's continue here. And if you don't mind, if you have any questions, I mentioned this at the beginning, please post it in the Q&A section. I don't know if the chat is working now. Jimmy's saying perfect. So yeah, you can post it in the chat. You can post it in the QA. We'll be monitoring both of them. So please go ahead and do that. And I see here Ben. Welcome Ben. Ben's from Arkansas, and Maggot is from Ireland. Welcome, welcome to both of you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And what we've broken this webinar into is basically three parts. The first part is educational thought leadership, where we're going to spend around 15 minutes exploring the journey of platform engineering and how it evolved and AI transformation. Then the second part, Bobby is going to lead us in that, and he's going to show us a demo of NF0 showcasing that AI native platform and its capabilities. And then we're going to open it up to Q&A at the very end and have a discussion. But as we're going along here, again, post your questions. Happy to answer them. So a little bit more about the agenda. We're going to start off with platform engineering evolution, understanding the journey and how we got to platform engineering 3.0 today. Then we're going to talk about the AI transformation in platform engineering and how AI reshapes infra development and governance. And then the essential skills and strategic adoption. How do you upskill yourself in AI? What do you need to work on and think of as you plan for safe AI integration within your company? Then we'll have our demo with N0. So practically showing you what or how AI capabilities can help, and then a Q&A session. So a little bit about the journey, how we got here, the platform engineering evolution, what we see or what I've seen personally, and I'm sure Bobby, let him pitch in a little bit where he's been on the journey as well. We started off in platform engineering 1.0, and I like to think of this as DevOps. So everybody's probably familiar with the term DevOps. And this is where around 2010, um, we started with traditional infrastructure automation and CI/CD pipelines, and we started to think about not having to manually do things over and over again, but start to automate our infrastructure. And at this stage, think of companies like or tools like Puppet, Chef, Ansible with configuration management, Terraform, Jenkins, GitLab CI, and different CI/CD pipelines. That's where we started to automate. And then we moved to platform engineering 2.0 around 2018. That's actually when platform engineering, the term itself, was born. And we were thinking now in terms of how can we provide self-service platforms for our developers to make their lives much easier. So as platform engineers, now we want to think of more in terms of product managers. We're building a product that our internal customers, developers are going to use. So you got to start thinking about golden paths, self-service templates, uh, tools like Backstage, Port as internal developer portals, Crossplane, Argo CD, all these tools come into play. And then fast forward to the present day, so around 2023, and this really got accelerated with generative AI, and this is Platform Engineering 3.0. So AI enhanced infrastructure with intelligent insights, automated governance, and IDE native workflows. And for the remainder of this talk, we're really going to be focusing on that last piece here, Platform Engineering 3.0. Real quick, I'll tell you where I was at each one of these stages, and maybe Bobby can share his story as well. But basically, like I mentioned, I moved from network engineering into the DevOps space. That was around 2017, 2018. That's when I joined Docker, spent some time there, and then moved into other roles at Sysdig and HashiCorp. That was around Platform Engineering 2.0, and that's when we started to think about well, it's great. The whole mindset of DevOps is great, and it's a culture, it's a set of principles, but realistically, we want to build tools and products that can enable developers to have self-service platforms in place. So that's kind of where my story was at. I don't know, Bobby, if you want to share maybe where you were at during that time.
Sure, yeah. I was actually in a bit of a different space, in all honesty. I was working in the financial sector with a lot of like hedge funds from 2010 to 2013 or so. But then that's when I joined Turbonomic afterwards. So yeah, I was working with Turbonomic, working a bit more, dealing with a bit more infrastructure related things, resource management, application resource management. But I think we were seeing a very similar trend, right? That you were seeing here and that you have outlined here in terms of this push towards self-service and just, giving developers um, more more free reign, right? So
Mhm,
that
mhm.
and at the end of the day, hopefully everything moves a little bit faster.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for that. Yeah. Which takes us really to the AI transformation of platform engineering. And we're seeing four kind of main trends emerging. And the first trend is really this idea of AI assisted delivery. So think of AI summaries, explanations, safer and faster changes. And we're going to dig deeper into each one of those trends as we go along. I have four slides after this, digging into each one of them a little bit in more detail. The second trend is IDE native developer experience, and this is where we want to meet the developers where they actually live, and that's in the IDE, whether they're using Visual Studio Code or Cursor. We meet them there, and we develop tools that can enable them to not have to context switch. And context switching is a real thing, and it really affects performance of developers and even platform engineers and anybody working with computers. You don't want to keep switching between a web browser and your IDE and maybe a chat window and this and that. That takes a toll on you and your performance. Um, and then the third piece here is governance preserved automation. So policies and reviews still in control while AI accelerates. Uh, it's very, very dangerous when we're starting to talk about AI and infrastructure to allow or let your AI go wild. If you're running this as a developer and you're vibe coding, for example, and building things, sure, maybe I mean, it's okay. But if we're talking about infrastructure, infrastructure affects everything. There are multiple applications running on it, and it's dangerous to let the reins out. So we need to talk a little bit about governance and how AI can assist, but we need to have guardrails in place. And then finally, data-driven operations where we want to leverage drift context, audits, cloud analytics to provide some deeper insights as we go along. So AI assisted delivery, and this trend is all about speed with clarity. And instead of reading hundreds of lines from a Terraform plan or an OpenTofu plan or debugging a failed apply, I want some summary to tell me in plain English, highlighting risks for me to understand what's going on, explaining errors, giving steps to fix them. I need actionable data, which saves me time and reduces escalation. And I don't have to be a super Terraform guru to understand what's going on here. I want something to be a lot easier to work with. So clear infra, diff summaries, early risk and impact detection, accelerated engineer workflow is what we're looking at here. That's AI assisted delivery. IDE native developer experience. This trend brings platform tooling right into the editor, like I said, where developers are working every day. They can ask questions, inspect templates, check state from within inside the IDE, while again, governance rules still sit behind everything. So direct platform integration, natural language interaction, seamless workflow, that's what we're looking at. All right, so let's move on to the next one, governance preserved automation. And this trend is where we want to um, make sure that AI can help us with, can help draft or fix the change, but is also always the platform that decides if that change gets deployed. So remediation creates a pull request, for example, and it does not silently apply changes in production. So we get speed without losing control. And I think if you get anything out of this talk, just remember that yes, AI is great and it will accelerate as we go along, but we always have to have our proper guardrails and governance in play. So AI-driven workflows, policy controlled, intact guardrails and source of truth, and controlled drift remediation. The fourth trend here is the data-driven operations trend, and this is all about giving platform teams insight instead of alerts. You've heard of alert fatigue, right? We want to get insight out of our data. So we can ask questions like, show me which environments have drift risk or which teams are seeing the most failed deploys and get some answers instantly and turn this data into action. And Bobby, I think you're going to talk a little bit about this idea of, hey, let's show me, and I like this what M0 can do here. Show me what environments not only have already gotten drifted, or but also what environments are in risk of drift, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in a perfect world, we can avoid things more preventatively, right? So being able to identify candidates or things that are maybe in a bit of a risky state for whatever reason, uh, for something like drift, is very beneficial, right? Because then you can address that before that drift actually happens and affects you in any other negative ways.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah. So AI surfaces drift causes, AI powered cloud analytics. So natural language queries to provide instant cloud insights. What's going on in my AWS cloud, for example, historical context, audit visibility, and operational data into guidance to transform data noise into actionable guidance. Cool, cool. All right. Let's talk a little bit about essential skills for platform engineers. Um, Technical, I like to break this down into technical competencies and strategic capabilities, right? So first, technical competencies. So AI tool integration inside of your infrastructure workflows. Um, so you need to be able to understand the AI tool integration itself and what infrastructure as code really means in terms of what you're using. So if you're using CloudFormation, if you're using Terraform, OpenTofu, a deep understanding of the actual tool that you're using is very helpful because now you can steer the AI in the right direction. AI will give you recommendations, but it's essential to have the human in the loop, and this is really point number three I'll get to in a second. The second piece is deterministic infrastructure as code practices. Um, if you've had enough time working with LLMs and generative AI, you'll find very quickly that they're non-deterministic, right? So and they're not repeatable, basically. If you ask something from the LLM, it will respond back every time a little bit differently. So that is where it becomes a little scary when you're putting that in front of infrastructure directly. So that's why I would say up until this point where we're at right now, we still need Terraform in or OpenTofu as a layer in between a middleman. So you can ask AI to build your Terraform code, for example, and then you review it um, as a human in the loop. You can get tools like NVZero, as we'll see later, to kind of quickly read the plan and tell you in plain English what's going to happen. That is absolutely fine and great, but at the end of the day, you need that layer in between as we stand today. I don't know what tomorrow will bring because this space is moving very fast, but where we stand today, we really need that human oversight. Data-driven operations and analytics is key, and also event-driven architecture design is also key for those skill sets. Then moving on to strategic capabilities, and I have a whole slide on this, so we'll jump into it in a second. But real quickly, automation ethics and governance, human AI collaboration balance, cross-functional communication, and continuous learning mindset. So the reason why I want to focus on this a little bit as well is, technical skills are always in need and are very, very important. But at the same time, we're coming to a point where the syntax of what you're using doesn't matter as much. It's thinking as an architect, we're moving up one layer where the AI is going to program a lot of the YAML, the HCL, whatever you're using, the pipelines, you need to take it a level higher and understand the broader picture of what's going on. So first we'll cover, automation ethics. So understanding when to automate versus require human approval in our workflows, when to insert that human in the loop and where. Then looking at human AI collaboration, knowing when to trust AI recommendations versus requiring manual review and validation is essential. Then cross-functional communication, translating our infrastructure automation capabilities into business value for stakeholders. So once again, engineers need to take it one step higher, think in terms of architects and architecture of the entire system itself. And then finally, we're in this field and we signed up um, to always be learners. So continuous learning, understanding, and staying current with the rapidly evolving tooling that we have and maintaining operational stability. Um, Excellent. So we have a few questions here. Let's see. We're done with the
Yeah,
first part,
do you want to
and then
maybe let's maybe address some of these questions real quick, Sam,
yeah,
just before we
yeah.
transition. Cool.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
I think there was one question here from Lala who asked, how does platform engineering 3.0 differ from previous iterations in terms of AI integration? Great question, Lala.
Yeah, how does platform G3? Yeah, so like I said in the previous slide here, let's see, where is it?
Yeah, maybe we can just pull up the 2.0 versus 3.0.
There we go.
I think
Yeah,
3.0 is really where AI kind of makes its initial entrance, right,
exactly.
Sam?
Exactly. Yeah. No, exactly. We were all as ChatGPT came out and everybody was like, "What in the world is this?" And then people start to think, "Oh, well, maybe I can use it here, or maybe I can use it there." I think that's where it started. And then I personally started using it right away with Terraform. I'm like, why am I working so hard to create a module and then figuring out, how the module integrates with the rest of my root modules and all that kind of stuff? Why don't I get ChatGPT to work for me? And let me tell you, it was painful in the beginning. It didn't understand the providers. The providers were being updated much faster, and ChatGPT only had a certain point in time where it was trained on the data, so it could not keep up with how different and how the providers were changing rapidly. Things have changed quite a bit since then, and now we can, enhance this. You can point it directly to the documentation. It can read the documentation. It can, fix things for you. So around 2022, 2023 is probably where the AI integration came into play. And again, Bobby's going to show us practically how M0 has embedded all that into the platform itself. So great question, Lala. Um, what else do we got
And then
here?
Dave had a comment just saying, is it just me or are LLMs much worse? More hallucinations, nonsensical suggestions, code that doesn't work at IAC than at quote unquote normal programming languages.
Yeah, Dave. So, like I mentioned, it was super painful for Terraform, for example, in the beginning. Things have gotten better, but it's a debate. I just read yesterday an article. Somebody was arguing that sometimes the LLMs actually, instead of speeding things up, they slow things down because now I'm going back and trying to fix all the broken code that the LLM has created for me, right? So yeah, take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes it works very, very well and it speeds things up for me, and sometimes it does not, like you mentioned.
And I would say the more core thing there is just being aware of the fact that, you know, things, hallucinations and things like that happen is very important, especially if you're going to adopt AI, right, Sam? I know you touched on that towards the end of your presentation there, but AI is great, but it's not perfect, and you need to understand where the pitfalls are to make sure that you don't end up in a sticky situation as a result of it.
Yeah. No, exactly. And you need to know what you're doing, basically. So if you're building with Terraform and OpenTofu, sure, I don't need to know the specifics of a provider, what it is, but I need to know enough to know that that recommendation is not right, and I can steer it in the right direction. And at the end of the day, you got to test, test, test like crazy before you do anything, right? I think we're good with questions for now. Bobby, let me stop sharing if you want to start sharing, and we can see a little bit of
Yeah.
you're in action. And
Let me go ahead and share out my screen
yeah,
here. Let me just share my whole screen. Can you guys see the M0 UI?
yes, I can
Awesome.
see.
So let's jump into it, guys. M0 is a pretty robust platform. So we're definitely not going to touch on all of the different things that it can do. And we're going to focus a bit more on just, ooh, how we're leveraging AI in certain areas of the platform and of the product to at the end of the day, make things easier for our users and for our customers, right? So as Sam mentioned, really the why statement for M0 is really around enhancing and allowing our customers to deliver on speed and standard slash governance, right? Now, how we do that is in a few different ways, right? So from a speed standpoint, let's talk about self-service. We make it insanely easy to deploy infrastructure, right? So if I'm an end user, when I log into M0, I'm typically assigned to these things called projects. A project is basically just a logical grouping of your organization, right? So in our demo instance here, you can see we've got, AWS projects, Azure projects. Within those projects, we have sub projects. So it's just a way of logically grouping and splitting up the org, right? So in this situation, I'm logged in and assigned to this non-prod project. And if I want to spin something up, I can do it in 2 clicks, right? I would hit create new environment. I could try to spin something up directly from code that lives in my VCS, or I can also use templatized code, which is basically just a pointer towards wherever my VCS code actually lives. But long story short, I'll use a template for this example. So let's say I want an EC2 instance, right? Or a front end server of some sort. So I'll scroll down here. I'll grab EC2 instance demo 1201. I'll hit run now. I can adjust some of these settings if I want to. For the sake of our demonstration today, I'm not going to. I'm going to hit run, right? And you're probably thinking, you guys are all probably sitting there thinking like, all right, when's the AI and things like that going to start? It is going to start very, very shortly. What I just want to show you real quick and give you some context into is, how to actually do things in M0 in hopes that when we cover the AI pieces, it's a bit more relevant and makes a little bit more sense, right? So right now, we're deploying an EC2 instance, right? And you can see we're stepping through our deployment logs here in M0, and for every single step, you can see a full readout, right, of what's happening, right? Some of these steps are going to look probably very familiar to most of the people on the call today, right? We've got initialize, open tofu init, get working directory, right? These are all things that you guys have probably seen before, right? Open tofu planning. Down here, we've got some applies and the output, et cetera, right? So where does the AI come in? Well, the first place that the AI comes in is going to be in the planning portion, right? Understanding the output from a plan is very important, right? Because that's really where you're going to see the different changes that you're doing. That's really where you're going to get a sense of what your code is actually trying to do, right? What is it trying to deploy? What kind of configurations is it trying to leverage, so on and so forth, right? And no shade at you, Sam. I know you spent some time at HashiCorp, but a lot of these IAC tools today, they don't make it very easy to consume this information, right? This is the pure, straight readout of this open tofu plan. And I mean, I'm familiar with all of this, but looking at this makes my head hurt, right? So how can we leverage AI to make this a bit more consumable so that people uh, can better understand the information being provided here? Well, we can do it in a few different ways. For one, right, we can kind of quickly summarize for you just what exactly is happening, right? So what are we creating and what kind of outputs do we have, right? But if you want a full normal language type breakdown, you can hit this summarize button here, and this is going to use AI to explain basically everything that's happening in that plan in everyday English, right? So we give a nice overview, right? That gives you a quick understanding of what's going on. And we highlight the resource changes and the various configurations and attributes of this deployment in plain, simple, everyday English text down here. And I think the best part is this bottom, right? Which is what are some notable observations, right? Things that I should think about. What are some additional recommendations that I should probably consider implementing, right? Some security considerations, tagging strategy, things of that sort. And then obviously the overall conclusion, which kind of summarizes everything that's being displayed up here, right? So again, in terms of speed and standards, this definitely aligns a bit more from a speed standpoint to ensure that users can deploy things and go through their plan analysis step faster without the pain of having to sift through something like this, right? And again, this is just one EC2 instance. If you're deploying something that's a lot more complicated, this can be significantly longer. So that's the first part of that's kind of the one of the first areas that we're leveraging AI to make things a little bit easier and to help speed things up. Another
Well,
portion.
Bobby,
Oh,
let
go
me
ahead,
jump in real
Sam.
quick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think this is incredible. You know what? It's easy to grab the plan and just drop it into Claude or ChatGPT or whatever and let it do that for you. But that's context switching. I think every platform nowadays needs to have that button next to whatever they need to explain right there and then and there. I really like that. Um, and I don't know about you, but I don't read logs anymore. I take the logs and I put it into an LLM and I get the LLM to summarize the logs for me. I think LLMs are really good at that.
Definitely.
So you know what? I really like that part.
Thank you. I'd say it also helps to have, the other thing about LLMs, I'm sure you've seen this, I'm sure everyone has seen this, right? Is like obviously there's training and tuning involved, right? In order to make sure that the LLM is as accurate or as effective as you want it to be, right? So, and again, nothing against Gemini or GPT or any of the other, more commercial everyday LLMs that are out there. Um, but um, but those aren't necessarily tuned specifically to what we're trying to do here, right? Um, and so having an LLM that is tuned, right, and built and trained specifically to try to understand some of these IAC concepts is obviously going to be a little bit more efficient, right, than just going to Gemini or GPT, where you might see things that was it Dave, I think that mentioned earlier, like the hallucinations and things of that sort. So yeah, great point. Um, let's continue to talk about speed and as it relates to the deployment process, right? Um, another area where I think some of our users express a little bit of pain is when things fail. I think we all feel that, right? Whenever something doesn't work, I think we all have a little pain, right? Because A, we were probably expecting it to work. And then B, we now have to go and roll up our sleeves and figure out why it didn't work, right? Um, so troubleshooting failed deployments is another area where we are starting to leverage and sprinkling in some of these AI capabilities to make that process a little bit easier, right? So in this situation, I've got a template here named Chekhov that failed. And if I look down here, it looks like it failed at the Terraform init step. And again, I could go in here and sift through the raw text if I want to and figure out, okay, what the unsupported arguments are, okay, all these different errors that we have. And then I can go from there and try to figure out what this all means, right? Not very easy. And when I look at these unsupported arguments, again, even myself being familiar, it kind of just makes my head hurt a little bit, right? Whereas if you just click this button, you again get a very similar readout to what we were showing you when analyzing the plan, but obviously focused on this specific problem, right? So, we'll lay it all out for you. The deployment failed during the Terraform validate command due to several unsupported arguments in the configuration files. Here's what likely happened, and here's the best part, right? Here are the things that you can do to not to debug and eventually resolve this issue. And here's a sample, right? So again, trying to speed up uh, the process for our customers when it comes to getting things up and running, right? So helping you analyze and understand the plans so that you can proceed with your deployment, hopefully a little bit faster, and also helping you understand when things fail, why they failed, and the steps that you can take to remediate so that again, your infrastructure is up and running as quickly as possible.
Very cool.
Any comments on this, Sam? Would you have liked these capabilities
Ab-
back in the day when you were spending some
Absolutely.
time doing this stuff?
Absolutely. And I really like how you, in the previous comment, you highlighted that this is not just any generic GPT. This has been trained specifically here on the platform, right? So I think that's very key in this. Um, yeah, we got a question from Paul.
Okay.
I think it ties back into the governance piece. He's saying when deploying AI agents within IDPs, so for example within Env0, how can Env0 help define safe permission scopes, make sure of deterministic outputs, and prevent misconfigs or policy violations? I'm assuming
Yeah.
that he doesn't. We doesn't. The Env0 doesn't talk. Sorry, the agent doesn't talk directly to the infrastructure. I'm assuming there's a layer in between.
Yeah, so M0 is kind of the layer in between, right? So and that's a great question. I'll answer it now, which kind of segues us into our whole MCP server thing, which I'll probably highlight in a bit more detail towards the end, but that's a great question. So we actually have an MCP server, right? So we allow people to basically do all the things they want to do in M0 without necessarily being in the M0 UI. Uh, and the thing about at least how we're doing it, right, is everything is related to in order to get that MCP server configured properly in your IDE, you have to, everything is based on an API key, right? And an API key is tied to some kind of role. right? And that role is going to be able to determine what said agent can and cannot do, right? And the cool thing about M0 is, governance is really one of our strongest areas. And what facilitates that governance is this project structure that I lightly touched on at the start, right? Because being able to create all these different slices of your org allows you to create really robust controls around what kind of role someone should have in these various spaces,
Hmm.
right? So, for example, I'm probably okay to have full read and write, borderline administrative access when it comes to dev. Probably don't want that in prod, right? And so when you're configuring your API keys and configuring your roles and your users, it's really easy for us to specify exactly what said role can and can't do. And then we can also, and I'll just go back to my settings here, uh, specify specifically, right, what each user or each agent, what role they have in each individual project so that, again, no one is able to do anything that they shouldn't do.
Right, but at the end of the day, it doesn't talk directly to AWS. It still
Correct.
needs to
It's talking
run an
to
open
us.
tofu plan.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yes,
Still needs to
yes.
run open to. Yeah, exactly. So that's perfect because that's the deterministic point, right? You're
Yep,
you're using the agent to maybe spin up create a template or run a template, but that's already been created and tested ahead
yep,
of time.
yep. Exactly, exactly.
Perfect.
Everything, the nice thing about M0 is we really try to leverage this concept of pre-approval, right? So making sure that uh, we're doing our work up front so that everyone has access to the right things so that we don't have to slow them down in the future when they want to go and deploy an EC2 or an S3 or a Lambda function or whatever, what have you, right?
Which is great.
Uh,
That's the self-service piece, and you can use OPA or whatever else in there, and the AI is just layered on top, but the
yep,
governance is built in. Perfect.
exactly, exactly. Um, awesome. So we talked about the failed, we talked about the deployments, right? Um, this is not very AI. This, in all honesty, this doesn't have any AI built into it. But you mentioned OPA, and this is something we released recently, which a lot of our customers find very powerful. So we have policy engine built in, an OPA policy engine built into our deployment process. A lot of our customers, are interested in leveraging that, but some of them don't have the best experience or the most experience in terms of writing, Rego and OPA policies. So we've actually decided to start shipping some pre-built policies for customers to use. And I can only imagine that in the near future, we're probably going to leverage some AI to make this a little bit easier, right? So that you're not reliant on just what we ship, but maybe there will be an AI agent that you can ask, hey, can you help me build a policy that does
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z, and I want to apply it to X, Y, and Z projects.
Excellent. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about day two operations because I do want to be a little bit conscientious of our time here and leave time for the Q&A. Another area uh, that where we sprinkled some AI is from a governance standpoint, right? And specifically, we're leveraging it in a few different areas around drift and visibility, right? So let's talk a little bit about drift because I believe who was it? Vicky had a question around drift earlier today. So um, drift is obviously a problem, right? For a lot of our customers that are leveraging IAC, right? And drift can also sometimes create even bigger problems, right? Because if someone is making changes and going somewhat rogue, that can obviously introduce some issues to in terms of stability and in other areas, right? So how can what does M0 do to help with that? So we've got this feature called Cloud Compass. The easiest way to think about what Cloud Compass is it's sort of like an auditor, right? So as you can see, we've pulled in all the different resources across our AW, all our different AWS accounts. We're able to identify which things are being managed by IAC, which things are being managed by ClickOps, which things are being interacted with via API. And not all of these resources are things that are actually being managed by M0, right? So for example, you look at the second one here, this S3 bucket website. It There's no environment listed next to it, right? When you don't see one, that means that this is not something that is being managed actively by M0. But that doesn't mean that we can't help you keep an eye on it, right? Um, and as Sam mentioned earlier during the presentation, it's not just about remediating things that have already drifted. It's also about trying to identify things that might drift in the future based on how you're interacting with it or how your users are interacting with it, so that in an ideal world, this never happens, right? So how do we do that? Well, let me crack one of these open. If I take a look at this S3 bucket tagging resource here, which is it's not being managed by M0 directly, we can see all the different events, right? In this case, looks like 6 total events that have been logged against this resource. And the interesting thing is if you go back to the start, right? So March of 2024, it looks like this resource was initially deployed via IAC, again, not through M0, but IAC of some type. And then a month later, someone interacted with it manually. And then a few months later, someone interacted with it via IAC. And then a few months after that, it was done via API. So long story short, you can see there's quite a mismatch, right? And inconsistencies in terms of behavior of interaction, right? So we've got some IAC, we've got people doing it manually, we've got people doing things via API. And as a result of this inconsistency, we are flagging this workload, or sorry, this resource as something that might experience drift in the future, right? Um, and and that's pretty cool, right? Because it does help our customers kind of address it beforehand, right? Maybe it's reaching out to Laron and Andrew and educating them on the right process of how they're supposed to interact with these resources to eliminate, an API making a change later on down the road that creates problems, right? So identifying drift risk is something that definitely has a little bit of AI capabilities, and then when things actually drift themselves. Um, we can do a lot to help you not just understand what the drift is, but also to help you remediate it, right? So in this situation, I've got this serverless API. This is actually a Lambda function that my coworker Carl here has been tinkering with, and clearly he's been tinkering with it quite a bit, right? We've got some unmanaged changes here. We've got the version change. We've got some variable changes. Uh, and none of this is reconciled with the running instance, right? Um, Now, again, just getting to this point of understanding what the drift is and where the drift is across all the different places it could live is not a very easy task to do without M0, right? But with our capabilities and some of the stuff that we're doing with AI, we make it a lot easier for you to digest this information, similar to the plans, similar to the failures, right? But the really powerful thing here is if I actually go to, let me just grab the latest deployment um, of this environment. If I actually go to this specific deployment, you can you see at the top right that we have the ability to not just identify the drift, but to also help you remediate this drift, right? And typically, remediating drift comes in one of two flavors. You're either going to redeploy the environment on your old code, right? Or you're going to update the code to make sure that it reconciles and matches what you have running in your environment, right? And as you can see, we provide both options here, right? Uh, Deploy the code changes, create a pull request. Let's say I decide to create a pull request, right? What this will do, I'm actually not going to click this right now because I don't want to initiate this. But what this is going to do is actually create a PR on your behalf automatically in your VCS, in the VCS solution that you are leveraging, right? So in this situation, you can see our PR here, update simple serverless API 75314 code to align with the recent changes in the cloud, right? What are those changes exactly, right? Oh, okay. It looks like we've adjusted some things with our default route settings. It seems like we've messed around with the ID a little bit. We've also changed the memory size and the timeout. So quite a few different things that need to be adjusted. And all of this is done for you automatically, right? Without anyone having to do anything. And again, just aligning with the overall process of speed and governance and leveraging AI to make those two aspects as easy as possible. Any comments, Sam, before I touch on maybe the last two things here? I know we're starting to run out of time.
Yeah, yeah, real brief. I mean, drift is has always been a pain for many organizations, and addressing it, I love how we can address the risk even before having to worry about fixing the drift itself. So that's one of my favorites here in this demo. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. My age old analogy is, like it's the easiest way to think about it is like, yes, we all have airbags in our car, right? They keep us safe, but in an ideal world, we never have to rely on them,
right.
right? So yeah, that's what we're trying to get after here. Okay, so I know we're running out of time. I'm going to speed through these last two things. Um, we're also starting to leverage AI when it comes to providing better visibility and observability into uh, your everyday operations, right? So we have some reporting capabilities in this platform, just like every other solution does, right? We can build dashboards. We can create reports, right? So for example, we've got like this Dora dashboard, this Dora metric dashboard that's actually pretty powerful, right? But creating this from scratch is not very easy, right? You have to build queries for all of these different tables. And again, not impossible, but certainly not the easiest thing to do, right? But with Milo, or Milo, who is our AI analyst, this process becomes really, really simple, right? So instead of having to create a dashboard and write a SQL query, or in this case, a SQL query, um, you could just go in here and ask Milo your questions, right? So, hey, can you show me uh, how many environments have failed in the last, or let's call it, yeah, let's give it the last week. I don't want it to take too long. So I typed that simple question, and in a few seconds here, we should get a nice table that basically returns my answer. So I've got 16, right? Okay, that's great. I got my number. But maybe what I really wanted was to actually see the names of these environments. Can you show me the names of these environments that failed, as well as the timestamp of the failure? And I swear I did not test this, so let's see. Let's see if it likes my prompt here. Yeah. All right. Okay, there it is. So now I've
Nice.
got my environment name, all my different failures, and which month it failed on, right? So all of these, obviously this month, since I asked for the last week, and I can continue to prompt it and get more granular and fine tune the results if I want to. But I think you get a pretty good sense of what you can do with Milo here. Uh, Last thing is the MCP, right? So as mentioned, we recently released this MCP server. So if you are anti-UI, right, or just prefer to avoid switching from tool to tool, and you just want to work out of, your primary tool, your IDE, right? Whatever IDE that is, it's okay, right? So as you can see, we support deploying this MCP server into Cursor, Claude, Windsurf, VS Code. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So I think for the most part, these are some of the more popular IDE solutions out there. Um, and in terms of what it can do, it can basically do, and we're like I said, this is new, so we're still building this out a little bit more, but it can do a lot of the core aspects of the M0 platform, right? So we could, for example, spin up and deploy environments. We can abort environments. We can approve environments, right? We can cancel things. We can check on things like drift, right? So actually, I'll flip to my cursor instance real quick. I've got some TF file here that I'm working on. If I wanted to, let's say, yeah, check for drift in here instead of in M0, I can say, I could run a prompt similar to this, right? And I'm just going to click to this old one that I ran for time's sake. But I basically asked it, hey, use M0 to show me which environments have drifted in the last week, right? And you'll get a full readout, right? Here is the environment name, when the exact last update was, what the specific ID value was, and everything that I am looking for, right? All with just a simple plain English prompt here on the right hand side, right? So that pretty much concludes some of our AI capabilities. And yeah, I believe now we're going to open it up for any questions.
Yeah,
And yeah,
that's pretty neat. Thanks, Bobby. That was really cool. We did get a bunch of questions during the talk. Any questions right now before we close? And again, you can use either the chat or use the Q&A. I see Jimmy's asking, is your team automatically detecting and remediating IAC drift today? I think this is to everybody. So if you want to answer that one.
yeah, sure. So yes, the short answer is yes. We are a lot of, I mean, us here at M0, we eat our own dog food. So yeah, when it comes to how we're leveraging our own platform for our own self-service and CI/CD workflows, yes, we are automatically detecting and remediating drift within our own infrastructure, right? So, and I do know there are quite a few of our customers that are doing this as well and seeing great success with this capability.
Excellent. Okay, I think we're good. This is obviously being recorded, so if somebody had to leave in between, you'll get a recording. But thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Bobby. That was an amazing demo. And yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Yes, there was a question about
Oh,
storing state files. Yes, we can store state files remotely on our backend. Great. Thanks, guys.
thanks, everybody.